There we go. All right. Thanks for coming by.
My pleasure.
All right. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. It's a Friday. We're here full day and gonna make the best of it.
I like the positive attitude as
Only thing we
always.
can do.
As always. So again, thanks for taking the time during your planning to meet. I enjoyed watching your lesson yesterday as we talked about that Prezi. It was a really nice way to engage the kids.
Yes. That's what I wanted to do, get them involved.
So the format, if it works for you, is just to talk about the lesson overall and then focus on something small and measurable we can do to move ahead for improvement for the next time. Okay, but please let me know if you have any questions or anything you need clarified as we're going. Okay, excellent. So the first thing I want to do is just commend you. I know school-wide we've been talking about having students own their learning, and as you were rotating around, you had one student say, "I'll take that answer if you can support it with evidence." So pushing the kids to find that evidence and be vocal about it, why do you think that was so impactful?
So for me, I know that even though I'm a teacher, there might be some points that maybe I missed within a lesson or within the question that I gave. So I'm constantly telling students that, you know, it's not just about me teaching you, you're teaching me also. So when they're throwing out an answer and I'm like, I can't see it in my head, but maybe you could teach me.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I'm going with it. Show me what you're seeing. And then, you know, if we connect, we connect. If it's not connecting, then maybe that's not it. So, yeah.
And I think that also speaks to just you using the word connections, having that personal relationship you do, and then making them feel comfortable to hear your redirection to move ahead.
That is huge for me, connection. For me, just I remember growing up and the teachers that I didn't have connections with, I did poorly with them. And so I just know for me, I need it. Even with my students who do not feel me, I still need to find a way to connect with them. So I just know that performance plays a role in that part.
But I think it shows through the management as well. That was something that was, the kids were on task, they were engaged. When you redirected somebody, they were ready to respond. You had Jasmine Troxler going to the board.
Jasmine says, I won't read. And I was like, and she's really a great,
She's a top scholar. Yeah.
She's an excellent writer. So, and with her, we have moments when we go back and forth.
We all do.
And I need to be mindful of the moments when I can share something good with her.
Yes.
Because I know that in the past, it's been a little bit of a struggle. So for her, her successes are in reading and in writing. So I need to push that more for her.
And I think that leads to what we're going to talk about today, is trying to engage all of your students using a turn and talk, because you have the groundwork, which is so difficult to lay. The students are comfortable with you. They're comfortable with each other. You have that level of respect that's built in your classroom. So let's talk about how we can engage all the students more in a one-on-one with them conversing with each other. Okay, great. So what would be the purpose of having students talk to each other in a verbal way about new content?
Students learn from one another, sharing. Sometimes the teacher's voice is very blah, 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 blah. And hearing their peers share.
Keep going, keep going.
Hearing their peers share information about what's going on in the classroom. It puts them in a position where they're like, oh, so you know how to do that? Yes. So maybe I should be knowing this too. So it just kind of puts more of that, a little bit of pressure on you to step up because you see your peer.
Very good, very good. Sorry for the delay. Here's a capture sheet just so you can use.
As you're going through.
There you go. So building on that, let's transfer that learning of the students learning from each other, as you say, to the lesson with the Prezi slides. So there was so much information in those 4 slides. What was the goal that you wanted them to be able to learn or discuss after seeing all of that information?
Okay, so we're in the Crucible and we had already read Act 1. However, because of the words, the dialect in the Crucible, I'm not sure if the kids were getting like who's got issue with who, and, you know, what's really going on. So that's where I was going with. I need them to like dig deeper with the characters. And the idea was to learn some of the character conflicts, discuss some of the character conflicts, and then with on-demand writing, write about how these character conflicts affect the theme of the story.
Okay.
So we were going with the conflicts, which would lead into the theme and the writing.
And you even said that. So I was looking through your lesson plan. You have employed textual details to construct a setting for the play. Then you did the charting of the characters, and then you did that. So let's think about that small action of how we can engage the kids in a turn and talk or discussion after all those slides to help build their capacity for doing exactly what you said next, which was that charting activity and the on-demand writing. So let's talk about that for a minute. What would be a prompt that you could have asked the students to talk about after those 4 slides?
A prompt could have been choose one of the conflicts that you've just seen and explain to your partner what the conflict is and predict how that conflict may be resolved by the end of the play.
Great, good. Yeah, so you talked about a lot of really important literary terms. You talked about the conflict, which was the whole crux of your lesson. You talked about explain, which is a higher level Bloom's term, and then resolution, going back to that literary tier 3 term. So I know this is theoretical, but we're going to make it more practical as we move ahead. So when you're doing that turn and talk, you have the question asked. What are some of the other parameters that make a turn and talk successful?
They need to know how to speak to one another. So the turn and talk accountability script maybe needs to be shared with them.
Okay.
As I talk more about turn and talk.
Right.
So yeah, it would be huge for them to know how to ask each other questions. How do you even listen?
Yep. So we know that there's many components to a turn and talk. It's not simply just scripting that response. We're going to go into more details of how that will be planned later. I thought it might be helpful just to take a quick look at the lesson that you had. Yeah, that's my number 4. That's the little one. Okay, so here's at the end of your first. You were reading it.
So you've got parents and conflict. You don't know how his congregation is going to be looking at him because of his daughter being accused of witchcraft. And then you also have Elizabeth and Proctor going back. Let's go to the next slide.
So I'm going to show you one more and then we can talk about it. As we're watching this, let's be mindful of what the students are getting out of the conversation and out of the lesson. So you presented, the kids responded with the word witchcraft. Here's your next one.
Very good. All right, so you've got Elizabeth believes that Abigail accused her. So Abigail and Elizabeth are going back and forth. Elizabeth does go to jail. John ends up ripping up the warrant, and they still on the court. Conflicts there. No, we're not, but we're going to keep on because
The other 2 examples are similar. We can watch them if you'd like, or does that give you a good framework? It's nice seeing yourself in action.
Yeah, I've never.
You've never seen a video?
Never.
Really interesting.
That's why I'm like, yes, I need that.
Let me share this with you when I'm done.
Please.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
And I'm more than happy to.
Yeah, because I'm always wondering, am I doing this right? Like, I just don't know. And you go with, I feel like I'm doing it right. I get my shot out. I'm like, okay, I did it right. But it's good to see.
Yes.
That way I can be like, okay, so next time maybe I need to have somebody else stand up there. And somebody else kind of lead that. I'm just getting ideas already
that's
formed.
super.
Just looking at that.
Good for you. So let's follow up on what you just said. Get somebody else to share those ideas. So let's talk about the practice that you just did of having a turn and talk and coming up with that script versus what happened in the classroom. What's the difference between you presenting the slides and going on versus the kids having time?
They need to be engaged with what I'm sharing. And of course the body language is, okay, they're quiet, they're looking at me. Does that necessarily mean that they're taking it in? I do not know. So the turn and talk would allow them to have an opportunity to share out loud what they get and what they're not getting. And hear from somebody else, what did you get? Oh, okay, that's what that meant. And then, use that to help fuel them along. So, yeah, definitely the turn and talk puts more of the learning on them.
Right. And I think you hit it on the head a couple of ways that you said it. You don't know what they're taking in. So that whole concept of making their thinking visible by hearing what they're saying, and then you're getting that data as you're monitoring for not only what are they discussing that's accurate, but not, because as we know, there's a lot of characters in that story that get interwoven, and the kids were even saying that in some of their responses.
It is a lot for them. And so, yeah, breaking it down with talking could help them to get it better. So I know of turn and talk, and I've used it greatly in the past. Excuse me. Let's say this. Naturally, these children want to talk, right?
Correct.
And I have got to find a way to make it accountable talk. So this is my, not fear, because I don't even like to use that word. The concern is when I say turn and talk, it's turn and talk foolishness. And so I've got to find a way to build or establish how turn and talk definitely has to go.
Right.
Because I can just see it going somewhere else.
Okay.
And I'm like, whoa, that's not what I wanted. So I have to find a way to start it from the ground, strong, so that as soon as I say it, they're like, okay, bam, she's talking about this, that, and the other. That's my concern.
No, that's a very valid concern, especially with our scholars that aren't used to such levels of accountable talk and say, hey, I think you should know what you do last night. What'd you do last weekend? Knowing that there's no place for that in this turn and talk protocol. So being very deliberate in what that protocol looks like. So we can spend some time doing that now. Okay? So good. So if you wouldn't mind, just so we have that we're all both on the same page with the language, what we just talked about, what do you see as an action step? What is the overall action step that we're going to do to try to engage students?
The overall action step is to introduce talk and turn to my students.
Good. So our goal is to implement a turn and talk.
Got it.
And that's going to engage all our students. So down here, the practice is going to be engaging all students. That's the goal that we're trying to do. Because as you mentioned, we don't know what they're thinking. And we don't even know what they're thinking is accurate or not, especially with all these characters. Okay? And as you said, there has to be a scripted, managed way to accomplish this. Because when we say turn and talk, they hear the talk.
That's all.
That's all. So let's break down that into 3 different parts. Okay? So the first part is going to be provide clear directions on start and end time. So knowing that a turn and talk is going to be very time bound, you're going to talk when I ask you to, and you're going to stop when I ask you to as well.
Okay.
Okay, number 2, the next step, provide directions on who turns to who, and establish, let's just slow down. Provide directions on who turns to who, especially in a large class, and establish what to do directions. Just to speak a little bit more about that, when we have those turn and talks, and this is all the planning that you've done before, and it's really a habits of routine. If you decide you're going to how you're going to turn towards each other, is it going to be to the person on the left, to the person on your side, the person in the front? And then when you're giving those directions, it's scripted and very precise about what they're going to discuss. All right, and then the last thing you're going to do is walk the room to monitor discussion. So ideally, when you're monitoring the room, you would have that scripted exemplar. So you know what you're listening for. So for example, if you know that they're going to get these characters mixed up. You're listening for specific character names. You want to hear them talking about conflict because they're going to need that to complete the next chart. Okay? So do those 3 steps look, is there anything you want to add or change?
Well, I used to work with Avid. I don't know if
Yes,
you're
I
familiar
am.
with Avid. Okay, so I want to look up some other ways. There are other turn and talk examples
Yes.
that they have, which is like, one is like corner talk, one is a number talk. So like, example, if I gave out numbers 1 through 4 to every student, right? And you either got 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. After we've done something where maybe we've talked about a conflict, I would then say all of my 2s get with a 4 and talk to a 4. Because as I was seeing it when you were explaining it, I was like, that's great because they're already sitting in pairs and you could just turn and talk. However, I feel like that's part of the comfortable zone that they're in. You know, all right, girl, let me tell you real quick, you know. But now if I say 2, go find a 4, you're asked to get up, you're asked to go and mingle, find your 4. Okay, we got 3 minutes. What did you do for this? What did you find for this? So on and so forth. So I'm just thinking of how I can turn and talk into a mingle turn and talk. But still on the same page of them conversing about the lesson, about the story, the play, and getting, you know, the whatever questions I put out there, making sure that they're getting it still. I was just thinking of how to do it without the monotonous, you know, turn to your neighbor.
And I applaud you for thinking about how to use this in a more unique and deliberate way, but I think it all goes back to this first one, providing clear directions. So regardless what you're asking them to do, if it's find somebody else that has the same number as you, if it's go to the corner if you're red, if it's go under this sticky note if that's the same color you have, you're very deliberate in those directions you're asking the kids to do. So it would be something like, on the count of 3, if you have a red sticky note in your hand, you will get up. You will have 10 seconds to walk to that corner of the room. So however you decide to do it, and I know Avid has a wealth of materials. I love teaching that class, by the way.
Yeah, I have some things that I'm going to go and look at.
So just be going, I think this is a framework for whatever you want to do, just being very deliberate on those clear directions are. Okay, great. So now what I'd like to do is just try to put this into planning moving ahead into a future lesson. So I have this sheet to help guide us, and all this is are these 3 steps that we just talked about. So think about, I know lesson plans were due yesterday, so hopefully you have one fresh in your head about a place that would be helpful. Now let's also talk about when is a good time to implement a turn and talk. We're not going to want to do it at every lesson. As you mentioned, the word monotonous, and there's a lot of planning that's involved with it. When do you think turn and talks are most effective?
It could be after you've shared something with the class about a character. You know, do you know of characters like that in real life? I feel like turn and talk could go anywhere. The beginning, the middle, the end. You know, it's just a matter of, again, explicit steps. Yeah, I think it could fit in anywhere. For me, for next week's lesson, I know we're going into Act 2 of The Crucible. And so I would say Monday and Tuesday, it's some heavy reading that we're doing and acting it out. I would say by Tuesday I could have a turn and talk, though. If we start reading it on Monday, and get the juices flowing, get a good homework assignment. That way on Tuesday, maybe the turn and talk would reflect on what was done for homework.
So, okay, so what did the homework involve? What is something critical you want to check their understanding for and monitor the discussion?
Yeah, we're going into Act 2 now.
You focused a lot on conflict in the lesson I saw. Is there another literary element that's coming up, or are we focused continually on conflict? Is there types of conflict?
There are types of conflicts. Honestly, I do not have a one set skill or framework that I'm looking at.
Is there something that you see that might be a misunderstanding that you want to make sure the kids are clear on?
The characters, that's where I went with the conflict, because I was like, these kids are just throwing out, you know, any old character is anybody. So that was huge for me, was getting them to know who's who. And I'm still having a little bit of an issue with that.
So you've identified a misunderstanding that's critical to
Yeah.
understanding the plot as you keep moving
Huge,
ahead.
yes.
So let's focus on the character and the conflicts.
Okay.
Okay, so if we're going to be, we can determine where it goes later on, but let's come up with some sort of prompt. What are the specific directions? So what I'd like to do is take a couple minutes, maybe 2 minutes or so, think of a character and a conflict prompt that you can ask in a turn and talk, and let's complete step 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll share what our examples look like.
Okay, so I'm thinking of the characters in conflict, one, and then I'm going to somehow project that question, but put the directions of that. Right
So you're
there.
creating a turn and talk. So right now, let's back up and say you've identified a part in your lesson on Tuesday where you're going to have your turn and talk. You said that characters and conflicts are something that you question student understanding. So we're gonna assess that student understanding in a turn and talk on Tuesday. So right now, what we're doing is mapping out what that turn and talk looks like. Okay. Draft. You can just put a couple. These might be complete sentences.
Okay. Let me see my head.
Okay? All right, so let's start at the beginning. Provide clear directions of start and end time. What do you have?
I have students will have 2 minutes. I wasn't sure if I should put 2 or 3. Can we discuss that? Okay. Students will have 2 minutes to discuss or explain, not sure which one I'm going to use yet, the conflict between John Proctor and Elizabeth Proctor. Students will provide 2 predictions of their relationship at the end of turn and talk. So what I'm asking for them is to discuss the conflict between Elizabeth and John, and then predict what is their relationship going to be like by the end of the play.
Okay, so those are good things for the kids to discuss. Let's try to stick with what our framework looks like. So we're only doing start and end time. So which part is your start and end time to start with? The 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Okay.
Right.
What is that 2 minutes? How are you going to tell them that it starts? What's that language? Like when I say go, when my hand goes up.
When I press start with the timer, that will be up on a smartboard.
Okay, so maybe make a note of
Okay.
that. So have smartboard timer ready for 2 minute countdown.
Timer on smartboard.
Excellent.
Got it.
So this next part, it sounds like we've combined number 1 and number
Okay.
2. So let's start with the first part of it. Provide directions on who turns to who.
Student sitting on the left will turn and talk to the student on the right.
Okay, how do I know?
So, because it's 2 desks,
Okay,
left and the right.
okay. Is everybody gonna get that?
I don't know.
Okay, great. So let's model it the first time out.
Okay.
Okay? Everybody's desk is in groups of 2.
Mhm.
Raise your hand if you're on the left. Raise your hand if you're on the right. No, Jasmine, you're on the left, stop playing.
Got it.
So let's check for that understanding beforehand, because if they turn wrong, or if they, as we know, they're gonna start
You know,
playing.
And I'm speaking as if everyone fully understands left and right, because I still feel like there's some issues out there. So you're right, like, I mean, literally, and it's so sad to say that so much has to be modeled for them
Yes.
to get it. But you're right, I do have to say, okay, who's on the left, who's on the right, for them to truly get what I want, do what I want them to do.
I'll tell you a story. When I taught 7th grade English at Jefferson, there was an issue in a poem about time. And I had one student try to use the clock to determine time. He couldn't read the time. So knowing something, like you just mentioned, maybe somebody is confused about the left and the right.
And
So
no one's going to say out loud, I don't know my left and right from my right.
So maybe you can even model. These students in front of me, you are on the left,
Yes,
it's
that's what I was
your left,
thinking.
you are on the right. So identify which pair you want to model. But you're right, the more we can be deliberate in scripting this out, the easier it's going to be to replicate.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you do have them do a different version, maybe the 4 corners you mentioned, they know that you're going to be giving them directions and they're not going to be sucking their teeth and sighing like, okay, this is part of the protocol. Okay. So I think you did the what to do directions earlier.
Yeah.
Can you read that again?
All right, so turn to your partner, discuss or explain the conflict between John Proctor and Elizabeth Proctor. Once they've discussed the conflict, provide 2 predictions of their relationship by the end of the play.
Now, let's go back to the goal of this turn and talk. It was to identify that they understand the characters and they understand the conflicts, correct? Do you want to add in the extra part of a prediction, or would you rather have them support the understanding of a conflict with an example from the story?
Predictions I threw in there. I would rather them to fully get the conflict and fully understand why the characters act the way that they act. So it would be more so focusing on that.
So let's modify that.
All right.
Good. So I like the way you're thinking ahead with the prediction, because you have the long-term goal of this turn and talk. It's not just this isolated time. So you did a good job with the thinking, but they only have this 2 minutes.
Got it.
So we want them to focus on not only what the conflict is, but like you mentioned earlier, in that the evidence to support why. So perhaps they can talk about what the conflict is and then identify 2 pieces of evidence from the
Provide
story.
2 pieces of evidence that describe their conflict.
There you go. And then as you're walking around monitoring, you've already gone back through chapter 1 and chapter 2, and you have a list of those conflicts. So if somebody is stuck, you can pepper them with an answer. Or if they're bringing in information that's not relevant to these 2, it's about somebody else.
Correct.
Okay. So now what do we have?
So that was a part of my step 2.
Okay. So what does it reread now as?
Okay, sorry. Students will discuss the conflict between John Proctor and Elizabeth Proctor and provide evidence that describes their conflict. Correct. Evidence that describes the conflict. Yeah. And in this case, the evidence is Abigail, who slept with John Proctor.
The only thing I might consider, would it be helpful to add a number to it? Is there a certain pieces of evidence?
Provide two, sorry.
There you go, that's it.
It's right there. I just,
I got
in
you.
my scrambles here. All right, and provide two evidences that describe the conflict.
Okay.
Two pieces of evidence?
Yep, that sounds better. It's our curse as writing teachers, always.
It is hard for me to text in slang.
I know.
Oh,
I
I have to tell my brain, it's okay, it's a girlfriend, just text in slang. I can't
I've
do it.
never done an LOL
Really?
ever, no.
Really?
It's the English background.
Yeah, it's hard, it's hard.
I know, but I think that sounds great.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to step 3.
Yeah.
Walk the room to monitor student discussion. So now that you're talking about John and Elizabeth Proctor, two pieces of evidence.
That describe their conflict, I should be able to hear. So I see here, have scripted exemplar. So I should have my own notes of their conflict and why they're in conflict and reasons, or yes, the reasons why they're in conflict. I would have all of that, like just in my own personal, as I'm walking around.
I would almost recommend having it on a clipboard. If you need a clipboard, I'd be happy to give you one. So you can even, I mean, this is another step ahead. I don't want to muddy the water, but like having a check mark, like yes, they're talking about it. Billy did it, Jasmine did it. Or if not, you could put a negative sign and then redirect.
No, I actually like that with the names because that's an easy grade to put in my grade book. Return and talk.
And it's easy because it's only 2 minutes. You're
Yeah.
walking fast.
Yeah.
And if somebody's stuck, you don't have the luxury of time to try to come up with an example to redirect. So you've taken, I bet right now you could give me 3 examples. What are 3 examples of conflict between those two?
One is that he had an affair with Abigail. 2 is that the wife begins to spread lies about Abigail. 3 is John didn't tell his wife the whole truth at the beginning. So those are 3 off the bat.
There you go. And it's easy planning. And it gives you a bigger bang as you're walking around, you're knowing what to look for. It's not just they're having the discussion, but they're having the discussion and it's accurate.
And it's accurate. And I can check them off that you got it.
Right. Right, and so compare that to, as we mentioned in the lesson yesterday, where we couldn't see their thinking. We didn't know where they are.
Yeah.
Why do you think this one's that much more impactful?
Because this one is going to allow me to hear them speak about it. It allows me to hear who doesn't have it. It allows me to hear who does have it so that maybe I could switch up my pairing next time. It's just great all around to know if I'm on the right track with what I'm teaching. Are they getting it? Do I need to find another way to present it? So yeah, it's good in all different angles when I think about how it can help the lesson, the teacher, and the students.
Right, perfect. The only other consideration I have is block 6. Sorry. I have to mention block 6. So modifying this for block 6 is probably going to look different.
Huge.
Okay, so
Turn and talk in block 6.
stop and jot perhaps. Maybe you want them to write it and then share their response with a deliberate partner. So instead of giving them those full 2 minutes, maybe they do a stop and jot where they're writing that and then they are sharing with the partner verbatim what they wrote until they can build the capacity, which we'll work on. They will get there, but we're not there yet. So knowing the, I don't want to say limits. Let's just say like knowing the growth areas of your students, how to make this more adaptable.
I got it. And that makes sense to me, stop and jot. I can see it working in my room as that. And then if we get to that next level where we can turn into return and talk, beautiful.
Exactly. Well, you could because you would be sharing answers. So the kids are used to sharing answers in a respectful way, but they're reading what they wrote. And this is kind of the precursor to the turn and talk.
Got it.
especially with you and Manley being able to rotate
Yeah.
the room and seeing what they
Yeah.
wrote before they, and maybe putting a
Actually
check
speak.
next to it, like you're allowed to read it. Or making, because you have your 3 answers and
Yeah.
maybe the question is more deliberate. Maybe it's one example, or how does this example of him having an affair show conflict? So maybe the prompt changes.
Yeah, it would
Alright.
change a little bit,
Mhm.
and I would probably make it one piece of evidence
Mhm.
too.
Good. Does this sound like it might work for Tuesday's lesson?
Definitely can work for Tuesdays.
I will pop in. I look forward to seeing it. Is there anything else you need from me to help plan this out?
No,
Okay.
no, not at all. I think I got it. And I am one for trying something. If it didn't work, I'm good to like get up and try it again. So I'm just gonna do my best,
Okay.
and take it from there.
Well, as your shout out says, I appreciate your dedication
Thank
and
you
hard
for the
work,
shout out.
and it's
I appreciate that. That was nice to see my morning coming in on time. It was on
it
time.
was well
Coming
deserved.
in.
It was well deserved. All right. Thanks for your time.
Always.
All right. Always a pleasure. Take care.